Hello, this is Mark Sabatella from Outside Shore Music. In this video, I'm going to talk about a situation that comes up every so often in a jazz setting. If you're a pianist and you're in a group in which there is, say, drums, maybe a horn player or two, but no bassist. A similar situation can happen for guitar, or maybe there's piano and guitar and drums, but no bass. So this is a pretty specific setting, but it definitely comes up often enough that it's worth talking about. And it came up for me actually twice just yesterday. I attended a concert that was a pianist, drummer, and saxophonist. And then later on, I was at a party where there was kind of an open mic session afterwards, and I was playing with a guitar and violin and melodica and percussion, and also no bass in either of these cases. And it reminded me that when I was in high school, my first exposure to jazz was actually playing in a big band, and we didn't have a bassist, and I had no concept of how unusual that actually was. So it is an unusual thing. So let me talk about why having a bass in a jazz context specifically, but not exclusively. It applies really to a lot of forms of kind of popular music, but I'm going to be using jazz as my main example here. Why is it significant to not have a bass? I would explain music in these genres as being composed of four elements overall. We have melody, we have chords, some sort of representation of what the harmony is, pulse, right? Some sort of forward momentum, something that is explicitly stating or implying a steady beat, and then bass is kind of a fourth important role that can be independent of all those things. Why is that the case? Well, it's just part of the convention of the genre. And if you think about this, think about what a jazz drummer specifically does. The typical jazz kind of rhythmic pattern is all about the ride cymbal, ding ding da ding ding da ding ding da ding, right? And then hi hat on 2 and 4, ding ding da ding ding da ding ding da ding ding. It's a very high end thing. There's not a lot of oomph. There's not a lot of low end to what the drums are doing. Chord voicings on piano, in order to keep from being muddy, we typically play them in this kind of range: A minor 7, D7, G major 7, those kinds of voicings there, in order to keep them from being muddy. Right? And there's not a lot going on down in the bass range the way a drummer might typically play, the way a pianist might typically play if they are playing the melody. And even if someone else is playing the melody, we're kind of conditioned to play our voicings here and maybe have something going on in the right hand on top of that. Right? That type of sound is very typical to how a jazz pianist will voice things, and it is also very kind of top heavy. And the assumption is there's going to be a bassist covering the bottom. So that sound combined with this, right? That combined sound, that's more like it, right? So, let's talk about now, what if we accept that sound is missing, that bass sound is missing if you don't go out of your way to cover it. If there's a bass player, they're going to cover it. If there's not a bass player, you're the pianist or guitar player or vibraphonist, or heck, even a melodica player. I actually picked up my own melodica, so there were 2 melodicas on stage. Never happened to me before, ever. And I actually played some bass lines on melodica, which was not very satisfying, but was an interesting, fun thing to try. But in any case, let's talk about what you would do as a pianist. So one thing you can do is what the pianist did on that concert that I attended earlier. He used his electric keyboard, and there's a button to press in which it splits the piano, so that low notes use a bass sound and higher notes use a piano sound. And then he was able to do things like this. Oops. right? So he was able to play walking bass lines, and you don't need to have a split keyboard. You can totally do that on just the piano as well, like I just did. There is some benefit in using that split capability of your keyboard if it has it, because it's not that the sound of a walking bass on piano is unsatisfying, but it doesn't separate itself out from the chord voicing the way we're accustomed to. You know, they blend together more. We don't hear it as two separate things, the chord voicing and the bass line, the way we would if it was a real bass player. So using the split is it's not just an affectation, it actually accomplishes something. There's also a sense in which piano, if I wanted to not play a walking line and just play a long, like whole notes, the decay sets in almost instantly, and these notes don't sustain as long as they otherwise would. So especially like on ballads, where maybe we don't want a whole walking bass line, we really might want just playing chords here rhythmically a little bit, but my left hand playing those whole notes, which is really what a bass player might do, it's not as satisfying as if I had a split. I don't even know if this keyboard has a split feature, you know, to be honest. Oh, there it is, right there. This sustains longer. You know, longer than a piano anyhow. So there we go. That's I didn't know that keyboard had a split, but now I do. I know my other keyboard has a split button right there, so I just checked on this one. Long notes can be perfectly effective if you know they're going to sustain. And sometimes playing them in octaves is effective as well. So by playing those long notes in octaves, you can increase the momentum of those notes that will, yes, they're still going to decay, but they started off with a little more oomph, and they're more likely to last through the measure. But there's a lot of different approaches, right? You want to learn how to make walking bass lines. You want to learn a lot of things about bass. But I'm going to show you, I'm going to kind of conclude this with one particular technique that I will say I learned from Oscar Peterson. I don't mean that I studied with him privately. I mean by hearing him play solo piano, as well as playing in like settings. I never heard him play in a setting with horn players and no bass. I've heard Art Tatum do that. But the way he plays solo piano or a duo with guitar, there's an interesting technique that Oscar Peterson had to playing bass parts in which he would play essentially two notes per measure. You know, instead of just the root, he would play like a root and a fifth or a root and a third or something. But he wouldn't just play them on 1 and 3. Let me show you what that would sound like if I played on root 1 and 3. And I'm just going to play melody and bass. I'm not even going to play chords. All right, I forgot to play one of my fifths, but let me do that again. All right, get the idea. That is as square as we could possibly get. I'm not syncopating the right hand at all, and the left hand is just ones and threes. Beat 1 and beat 3. There is such a thing as a 2-beat feel where you keep that just 1 and 3 in the left hand while syncopating the right hand, and that's kind of what I did at first without thinking, but I'm gonna do that more overtly now. Syncopation in the right hand, but left hand just 1 and 3. I just, made up some little syncopations in there. That works. That totally works. But the Oscar Peterson thing is really interesting. He, instead of playing those notes on 1 and 3, he enters a dialogue with his right hand so that the left hand notes show up in like the cracks in the phrases of where he's placing his right hand notes. And so it might not end up being on 1 and 3. They might be a little earlier or a little later. And the thing is, it's actually kind of easier to do that. trying to force myself to play on 1 and 3 while thinking about what I'm doing in the right hand, that takes a little effort and actually compromise what I could do in my right hand some. But if I kind of do some task switching, really focus on the right hand, and then when there's a long note, focus on the left hand, then focus back on the melody, then focus on the left hand, you get this interesting dialogue in which both hands are syncopated and you don't have to think about two things at once. And it's quite an effective technique. Hopefully I will get this do it justice, because sometimes overthinking it doesn't do me any favors, but let's give it a shot. Yeah, that's basically the idea. A couple little extra wrong notes in there. Wrong notes only in that they weren't what I said I was going to do. They were things that I just felt like doing at the time. But you see what I did? That little that was not bum bum bum. It wasn't 1 and 3, but it was a syncopated version of it. But I didn't have to think about that syncopation. It was more because that was on 1. This guy naturally wanted to show up like on the end of 1 so that I could kind of keep that back and forth going. And yeah, I mean, Oscar Peterson really kind of made a whole style out of that. There's any number of places where you hear like he's playing in a group setting and then everyone else drops out and it's just him, and he goes into that kind of feel. So anyhow, that is my little spiel on working without a bassist if you're a pianist or a guitar player in a jazz setting. These things again could apply to other styles, but the specifics will differ. And of course there's all sorts of other techniques, stride piano and other things that I could be doing in my left hand to try to carry on that bass role. But I don't know, I thought this was an interesting way to at least introduce the subject, since it was fresh on my mind after my experiences yesterday.